Running back is becoming increasingly hard to hit on in fantasy football. Injury rates are higher at that position than anywhere else, roles are becoming way more hyper-specialized than we're used to seeing, and quite frankly, the age of the bell cow back is over. People always talk about a lead running back getting 20 combined touches a game, and if you get 20 combined touches, you're a bell cow. That rarely happens these days. If you go back to 2010, we would see 13 running backs in total getting 20 or more touches per game, which is a lot. Last year we had 6. And by the way, one of those 6 was Derrick Henry, who got hurt halfway through the year. So technically speaking, in terms of a full season outlook, there were only 5. This position is a fickle beast for fantasy. Always has been, always will be. And that's going to be for a variety of different reasons. Again, there's going to be injuries. There's going to be offensive line volatility from year to year when guys get signed or cut or traded or, new draft picks come in that completely remake an offensive line. Even sometimes there's going to be offensive coordinators that are at fault here because even if they have a good offensive line and they have good running backs, they just refuse to run the ball. Looking at Philly in the first half of last year, for God's sake, they just wouldn't run it. And there was no way that we could predict that. And it hurt all of us. I'm still bitter as hell about it, but there's nothing we can do about it. So what we're going to be doing in today's episode is looking at backfield situations like that. And I'm talking about ones that have quote unquote bell cows and maybe some that have no bell cows at all. And it's purely committee. And these are backfield situations that people just don't really know what to do with them for one reason or another. We're going to try to use all the information at our disposal, both on the analytics side and on the film side, bring all that information together, and at least try to make the most informed possible decision about these murky, confusing backfields. But with all that being said, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. We have some very, very confusing backfield situations that we need to go over today, so let's just get to it. Now that we have some actual preseason film to chew on, we're going to begin with a running back room that's a lot murkier than I expected, a lot earlier than I expected. I was a big fan of Brian Robinson Jr. in the draft, and you all know that I thought he had 3-down potential and a really diverse skill set, but even I, who was really high on him, did not expect him to challenge for the starting role against Antonio Gibson basically immediately. However, after seeing Robinson not only out-snap Gibson with the first-team offense in the preseason last week, but also seeing Gibson himself cough up a fumble early on and then completely misread an outside zone call where he tried to effectively go backwards and bubble it outside rather than staying patient, pressing the B-gap, and then hitting a huge cutback lane for likely a touchdown. I don't know, I just don't really have the confidence right now that he's going to take the next step that we've all been hoping for him to take for 2 years now. Obviously Gibson is a great athlete, but watching Brian Robinson just carry the ball, I think he's a better overall player right now and a more developed player right now than Gibson. His vision, his pacing, his contact balance, those are all better. He's also ready-made out of the box as a pass protector on third downs, which we knew from his time at Bama, of course. He was a fantastic pass protector there, and he catches the ball very reliably out of the backfield as well. So other than just not having quite the same burst or top-end speed as Gibson in the open field, I truly think that Robinson is better than Gibson at all of the little things when it comes to actually playing the position. If this trend holds, and it very well could just based on what we've seen from Gibson so far and also what we've seen from Robinson so far, don't be shocked if Robinson ends up getting more carries than Gibson this year in what will almost assuredly be a very, very crowded committee. J.D. McKissic will still be the receiving back on most third downs, of course. I don't think that role is going anywhere for him. But in terms of who carries more of the load on early downs, I personally feel more comfortable investing a later pick in Robinson, whose ADP on Underdog Fantasy right now is all the way down at 170, rather than a much earlier and much riskier pick on Gibson, whose ADP is still almost 100 spots higher at about 79. In terms of just value and bang for your buck, and of course risk tolerance, this is not really a debate to me. I'm going to be passing on Gibson in most of my leagues at his current ADP. I'm going to let somebody else take that risk for me that he's going to keep most of the early down carries, which again, not a guarantee. And then I myself am just going to go after Robinson as my later round lotto ticket. Worst case scenario, if I'm spending pretty much just a 14th round pick on that high upside lotto ticket, That's exactly what I should be spending a 14th round pick on anyway, so it just makes sense to me. It might take a little while longer before Robinson fully takes over the lead role in that backfield, but to me, the writing is on the wall, and I think that eventually it's going to happen. Now, from there, let's go to another relatively murky backfield situation with the Atlanta Falcons, where yet another rookie could also be a lot more involved than you think. You all know that I'm basically the president of the Cordero Patterson fan club at this point. I absolutely love the guy. But even I have to admit that a big reason why he was so heavily utilized last season as a do-it-all running back / wide receiver is that the Falcons really needed him to. There was very little other talent on the roster last year. He was by far their best running back and their best special teams player, and at least one of their 3 best receivers, so he was pretty much everything for them, and they needed to use him as everything. This year, though, I think is a lot different. I think Patterson, who, by the way, is now 31 years old, will be phased out of being so heavily utilized as a running back so that he's a lot fresher and healthier for his special teams ability. And also, I think they want to keep him fresher so that he can be used as a versatile weapon in so-called high leverage situations. You know, key third downs, red zone looks, hurry up situations at the end of the half, all the kind of stuff like that. I think that's where he's really going to see most of his usage. I don't think that they want to bang him around being a bell cow back again when they really just mainly need him for those few key plays a game, which then, of course, brings me to rookie Tyler Algiere, who not only has looked fantastic in his limited action in the preseason last week, but who, by all accounts, he's picked up right where he left off at BYU and has been the Falcons' best true running back in camp as well. Going back to his days as a Cougar, I thought that Algiere had some of the best vision in this class, especially as a zone runner. And even though he's not an overwhelming athlete, I think that his background on the defensive side of the ball as a linebacker has really translated to his ability to read and set up blocking schemes at a much more advanced level than what we typically see from running backs his age. He really understands a lot of the nuances that go into offensive line play and how things are blocked, and of course how linebackers are going to be playing off of those blocks on the second level and kind of how they read things. And so he has a very instinctual way that he uses body language and pacing in order to influence those linebackers and, kind of help his offensive linemen get into the proper angles and get to their landmarks on time, of course. It's just a very cerebral way to play running back, and it doesn't really get highlighted a lot, especially in a player that is as young as Tyler Algiere, but he is very, very well developed as a running back. And I just think that that combination of vision and patience and discipline is going to get him a lot more carries as a rookie than people think. I know that Damien Williams is also on the roster, and of course Patterson will be a factor in terms of overall touch distribution, but in terms of which actual full-time running back I think will get the most work in Atlanta over the course of the entire season, I truly do think it will be Algiere. His underdog ADP is about 143 right now, so you can get him in roughly the 11th or 12th round in most drafts. And for a guy that very well could end up being a 3-down back that also gets goal line work because of his vision and power, and of course his blocking ability as a pass protector to keep him in the mix on some more third downs, there's just a lot of potential for production there. Again, we're talking about a bargain bin price, especially in best ball formats where you don't even need to guess which week to start him and which week to sit him in order to hit on the pick. And so, to me, he's worth that investment, especially if you're spending a whole bunch of mid-round picks filling out your receiving core and quarterback and tight end. You're eventually going to have to come back and get some later round running backs anyway, so he might as well be one of them. Now, to cap this whole thing off, I want to talk about yet another underappreciated rookie running back. I know you're sensing a theme here, but this one is a little bit different because I think that not only will he end up starting sooner rather than later, but I think that he's already won that starting job, and I don't think that it was particularly close. I don't know if you could consider Damien Pierce a chalk pick at this point because everyone is hyped up on him right now, but I couldn't make an episode dedicated to murky running back situations and valuable rookies at the position without talking about Damien Pierce. He is by far the best running back on the Texans roster. I said it the day he was drafted. We raved about the pick on the draft live stream over on our podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast. That's linked down in the description in the pinned comment, of course. And to be quite honest, even from about the second day of training camp on, there was very little doubt that he was going to be the guy in Houston. Even going back to his days at Florida, he is exceptionally powerful. His tackle breaking rate is just insane. He has great feet, wonderful vision. He catches the ball well out of the backfield. He has really good short area burst. The one thing that he doesn't really have right now, and this is kind of my one knock on him, is not great top-end long speed. So you might get a whole bunch of 15 to 20-yard gains, but maybe not the big 40 to 50-yard gain that some other backs can do. But in terms of everything else that you need to be a high-level starter in the league, he's got that. I have no idea why Florida underutilized him so much during his time in college, because he was arguably the best player on that offense last year. And Gator fans don't know either. They were dumbfounded by it. He really is a fantastic player that does not get the credit he deserves. And for a team that I personally think is on a massive upswing right now that nobody's really paying attention to, that team, of course, being the Houston Texans, there's a lot more potential for production here than I think people realize. The offensive line is better than you think. They should be at least competent on paper. Their receiving weapons are also a lot more talented than you think. Even the quarterback is more efficient than you think. And the defense, despite some glaring holes at a couple of different positions that will be addressed probably next offseason, that defense is also way scrappier than you think. They have a ton of young, exciting talent, especially in the secondary, and I think that this team will be keeping games close. And when the games are close and they're not blowouts, Damien Pierce is going to get carries. He will get fed over and over and over again. And then on third downs, guess what? He's going to get plenty of catches as well, because he can do that sort of thing too. I know that he's just a rookie fourth-round pick, and I use the term just with gigantic imaginary air quotes, but in a backfield with very little realistic competition for the starting role, and on a team that really does need a bell cow running back to anchor their offense around, I think Damien Pierce is it. The talent is there, the opportunity is there, and for a guy that currently has an ADP of 118, nearly the 11th round in most drafts, that's just too good of a steal to be true. You have basically nothing to lose here, so in my opinion, you should be spending one of your late round lotto tickets on Damien Pierce, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get a top 20 running back out of it for very, very little upfront cost. Now, it is possible that you might want to use the information that we talked about today in more than just your home league with your buddies to dominate your friends and family. Perhaps you want to use it in a best ball tournament to try to win some serious cash, and by that I mean $2 million of serious cash. The Best Ball Mania 3 tournament over on Underdog is $2 million to first place, $1 million to second place, and so on and so on. There's a $10 million cash prize pool. It is the biggest best ball tournament ever. In fact, last year's was also the biggest ever, and then they 10x the prize pool for this year. It is absolutely insane. And if you're not familiar with best ball as a format, by the way, because I'm sure a lot of you have never played best ball, I actually find it a lot easier, or at least less time consuming than a normal fantasy format, because from week to week, whatever your maximum possible score would have been for your lineup, that is what gets counted. You're not going to get screwed over by injuries or weird game scripts or anything like that. You just get credit for the best possible lineup you could have had out of your entire roster. So again, it really emphasizes being a good drafter and building a good deep roster that on any given week could potentially go off. So for all of you out there like me that are better at the front end work, i.e. doing all the summer research and drafting a good team, and maybe not as good at the back end work, i.e. waiver wire and, hoping that you get lucky with start sits and all the situations that can happen in the middle of a game. If you're better at the macro stuff, best ball is for you. So if you're interested in trying it out, again, you can go to the link in the description below, use promo code Brett, and that promo code will give you a first-time deposit match up to the first $100, which conveniently, if you want to use it on Best Ball Mania 3, each entry into Best Ball Mania 3 is $25, so you could theoretically get 4 free entries into that contest, or use that $100 in whatever other way you want to use it in, because there's a whole bunch of different sports, a whole bunch of different types of contests. You can use it on pick'ems during the season, which is kind of the main thing that I do during the season. So again, the deposit match of whatever you put in there up to the first $100 is probably the best way to go about that. if you're interested in best ball, of course. It's a really fun website, very different format than I think a lot of people are used to, and it is a very refreshing change of pace for people like me. So with that being said, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys very soon with some more cool stuff that I can't talk about yet. And until then, cheers.